Hi, I'm Linda Fanaris, host of B2B Brand180 podcast and CEO of Millennium Agency. And today it's where we're going to talk all about branding and growth strategies and ways to help your business grow. But before I get started, I just want to take a minute to thank our audience for listening. And if you like what you hear today, please like, share, or subscribe. So today I am very excited to bring in Ian Baer. He's the founder of Sooth. He has spent his career helping major brands in leadership roles, including Publicis, TBWA, Rap, and many others, and he'll touch on this shortly after. His experience spans from almost every business and consumer marketing category, working with Verizon, Samsung, American Express, Adobe, JP Morgan Chase, and others. So welcome, Ian, and thanks for coming to the B2B Brand 180 podcast today.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
It's great to have you.
Shop and gosh, you just went through a laundry list of some of my all-time favorite clients there. So
that's awesome. Well, let's get started with a quick introduction about you. I'll turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself that I maybe didn't cover yet. And we'll get started with some questions to help our audience today.
Sounds good. Well, I like to say that I did every job you can do in the agency world. I spent 35 years working for some of the biggest agencies in the world. I was president of 3 agencies. I was chief strategy officer of 3 agencies. I had a 7-year run as a chief creative officer. So I wore all those hats. And when I ran out of things to do in the agency world, I pivoted out about 2 years ago to start Sooth, which is a marketing insights platform and consultancy that's focused on helping brands connect with the emotional needs of the people who buy from them, both business and consumer.
That's awesome because we definitely need that emotional connection these days. And I have to give you kudos if you've been working in the ad space for all those years. You must have some serious stamina.
Well, you know what? I love the business.
Right.
I always say I feel bad for people who don't love what they do. I've had the good fortune now for decades to be able to do something I really enjoy, to build my craft. And really, in a lot of ways, the company that I started is just codifying the unique way I've had of doing things all along. So this is still a labor of love, despite the fact that, it also keeps the lights on.
Yeah. So why exactly did you leave the agency space to start your own company? Was there something that sort of jolted you into a new direction?
I've read an article. I think those of us who try to stay well-informed and maybe a little ahead of the game in the industry, every now and then you read something that really makes you step back and changes your perspective. And I think it was 2016, I read an article in the Harvard Business Review that's called The New Science of Customer Emotion. And for a long time, I had preached the value of emotional connection to the clients I've worked with. But it was always this battle of, well, that sounds like a warm, fuzzy thing, but, I'm all about results. And this was the first time there was a really well-developed white paper that showed the ROI potential behind emotional connection. And as time went on and the work I was doing with clients, that became my obsession, to help clients find a unique connection to their customers purely on the basis of their emotional motivation. And eventually, I actually developed that into a scalable, repeatable, scientific method. We have a patent pending now. And that's one of the reasons I started Sooth is everything is now driven off this platform of being able to predict the emotional needs of customers based on data that's readily available in the market.
That's great because I think what happens with a lot of corporations is that they're focused on their product, they're focused on their company, and
of course,
they're talking about their features and even their benefits. And their benefits do not line up with that necessarily that emotional connection that we talk about. And then I like to look at the example of FedEx because I think when they first launched, they did a great job with their positioning on making that saying, hey, overnight delivery guaranteed. I mean,
that's right.
That immediately, the minute you hear those few words, you have an emotional connection, that brand, and that you're going to get this guarantee and they're going to make that delivery. So to talk about that connection, to talk about that sort of way to be able to get to that place. Can you tell us a little bit, how do you get to that place with your platform?
Well, so again, going back to that Harvard study that did change my perspective, they found that out of the 34,000 different emotions that we feel, I mean, gosh, human beings are just incredibly complex. There are only 10 that have ever proven to positively correlate to purchase behavior. And when you consider that 90% of all the choices we make as human beings are emotional, if you can help a brand understand not only which of those emotions come most into play for their customers, but what the hierarchy is, then you really start to unlock something, because these emotions are things like the desire to have fun, the desire to have freedom, the desire to feel like you're connected to a community, the desire to feel safe. And we all feel all those things. But understanding when you're coming down to a decision where you're choosing between the thing that looks like a good time and the thing that feels safe, being able to predict which of those you're going to choose consistently,
Right.
that is really going to unlock a lot of success for a brand. That is what we're able to do. We actually have a method that takes those 10 emotional elements and we produce something that looks and operates a lot like a credit score for each of them.
Okay.
So if I know that you're a
Okay.
742 for confidence and a 356 for fun, I know how to speak to you. I know that finding ways to inspire your confidence is going to be more appealing than showing you what might look like it's going to be a blast, but
Right.
might not make you feel any better about what you're doing at work every day.
So I'm also curious, as far as your product is concerned, what do you think makes that so unique compared to some of the other platforms that are out there, or even processes that are out there by companies?
Well, there's certainly a lot of processes at play, and look, some of these things traditional market research has been doing for years. Here's the difference. Everything I do starts with data on everything we do. Starts by looking at 220 million US adults. And we're able to cross reference thousands of different, not only demographics, but more importantly, behavioral elements, psychographics, transaction behaviors, attitudes, tendencies. And by using AI, we can crunch all of that data in days or weeks compared to what used to take maybe 3 to 6 months worth of market research and maybe an investment of a couple of $100,000 to get to the sort of data we can produce for clients and allow them to act on in a few weeks' time. So it's that speed to
Right.
market, the ability to generate the insights before they expire, because things do change
Right.
so quickly, but also the 95% confidence level that you get from having these massive sample sizes that we can not only query once, but we can actually maintain them as a panel and keep going back to them
Okay.
every time the brand has another question about how might this offer play, or how do they look at this competitor in the market, or how has, let's say, the current election cycle impacted the way people are
Right.
buying in my category. We can hone in on those things immediately.
So you can get immediate results.
Yes, it's basically we've done what traditional quantitative and qualitative research can deliver in a fraction of the time, fraction of the cost, with a much higher level of statistical accuracy, because all of our results are, as I said, at a 95% confidence level because of the massive
That's
amount
awesome.
of data that we crunch.
Do you think that this is a product that's great for agencies, corporations, marketing departments? Who would this be ideal for? Both?
We've applied it so many different ways. The funny thing is when you start a company that essentially is doing the sort of work that hasn't been done before, you have some perceptions from day one. At the beginning, I said, well, I think we'll probably be a great secret ingredient for agencies and pitches. I think we'll
Right.
help brands looking for an edge, maybe in positioning. But what we have found is, in one example, we worked with a pharmaceutical company to help
Okay.
them identify the emotional needs of a base of sufferers of a disease that most people don't even know they have. So because this population's not diagnosed, not identified, there is no third-party data available. It's hard to even recruit a research panel, but we could look at things like
Right.
symptom profiles, how much people have visited certain types of specialists, and actually convene a panel of sufferers who haven't even been diagnosed. For one of our
Right.
clients in the tech space, we were able to help them identify an entirely new B2B business model to reposition their technology solutions in a different way, differentiate them from much larger players in the market. So we've done everything from brand positioning work all the way down to like very precise social media strategies that map to not only what the audience you want to reach is doing in social, but platform by platform, exactly which activities they're performing there, so we could map it almost like a playbook and say, here's exactly how to spend your money to have outsized impact with your target.
Over the years, have you actually seen the lines between the B2C market and the B2B market blur, or do you still see them as being separated? How do you
Oh,
view
I think
that?
they blurred dramatically. I think the Amazon effect, 5
Mhm.
years ago, we were still mostly talking about how consumer brands were going to keep up with that. But what
Right.
has happened, and especially the impact of the pandemic, where suddenly they're sitting in the same chair in the same room and seamlessly shifting from I'm a CFO, now I'm a dad, now I'm a car
Mhm.
enthusiast, and there's no compartmentalization of life anymore. So people increasingly have had the same expectations for everything to work like Amazon, for everything to work as easily as their mobile phone. And there's no longer that expectation or forgiveness that things work differently in the business world.
Right.
People crave and want and will use brands that make it easy for them to do business with them and make them feel understood as human beings.
Mhm.
Even when we're making
Mhm.
business decisions, we're not making
Right.
decisions as companies. We're making decisions as humans, whether you're a business of one or you work for a company of 50,000 people. It always comes down to people making decisions based on what they need from that choice. And I think in that respect, a lot of ways, I don't think we're operating in a world of B2B and B2C as much as we like to say B2I. It's brands to individuals. That's really the way marketing works today.
That I agree with, but I do wonder, because when you are talking to different target markets, whether you're talking to a stay-at-home dad or you're talking to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, depending on what role they're in at the time that you're actually have that touch point, you
Right.
do need to communicate to them in that most effective way. And how are you able to achieve that? And are you able to achieve that?
What we do when we build out our audience models, we don't really look at marketing targets. We like to look at whoever a brand is communicating with as an audience. They are there to consume content, to consume experiences, to have their needs met. So when we overlay filters that are specific to somebody's professional function, you can
Right.
really see that shift in their priorities. And so if I'm looking at somebody who, yes, if I didn't identify this person as the CEO of an agency,
Mhm.
I might just think she was a mom. But once I'm able to overlay other factors, it's almost like, that eye exam where it's a filter and a filter and a filter. And when I start to see her now in that professional mode, based on the industry websites she's interacting with, based on following leaders in her industry in social media, based on the sorts of information and experiences she seeks out, we can actually measure that shift in emotional priorities. We can see, oh, when this same person moves into business decision making mode, actually her need for security doubles, her desire
Right.
for freedom becomes greatly decreased. So we can watch these things ebb and
Right.
flow based on the transient nature of somebody navigating through these many different roles we all play.
That's great insight, actually. Awesome. So before I get on to the next question, I just want to take a moment and thank our audience for listening in today. And if you like what you are hearing, please feel free to like, share, or subscribe. Let's talk about the sales journey a little bit because that has
Sure.
so much changed over the last, whatever, 10, 15 years. What impact do you think it's actually had on brands in the space, and especially in the B2B space?
Well, let's start with this. It's no longer linear. I get very uncomfortable when I see people focus too much on traditional sales funnels or linear journeys that
Yeah.
show somebody moving from, a certain stage of awareness to an identified need to engagement. The reality is now, especially because of the advent of social media, especially because there's so much really in the B2B space now, commercially oriented content that can motivate people to buy almost instantly. You're seeing people look at software solutions, for example, that, they might look at a 30-second video that plays on LinkedIn, and they have gone from pre-awareness to, at the very least, a qualified lead, maybe even to a purchaser
Hmm.
in as much time as it takes to click their corporate card into a sales window. So I
Hmm.
think social commerce has been a great accelerant. It's another one of those things that was dominating for the past few years in the consumer space. And now we are really seeing it ramp up, especially for smaller businesses, independent business people who just need to make decisions quickly, get valuable tools and resources that augment what
Right.
they can do on their own. Everything from AI assistants to enable calendar tools and this grab and go mentality that now exists around business to business tech has people jumping multiple layers of a funnel.
Right.
At the same time, it's not linear. People go
Right.
forward, people go backward, people socialize certain decisions. So they might spin out into this influence loop and then dive back in. And if you're
Hmm.
trying to manage somebody through a typical awareness to lead to qualified lead, you're going to lose that opportunity before you figure out what to do with that person. The speed is just a major factor in a way it hasn't been in the past.
I always struggled with that customer journey process and strategy because in order to technically, if I'm going to market to you, Ian, and I'm going to technically take you from step one to step two right through the funnel, it's not that easy because to your point, there's a lot of emotion behind that. And if you don't have the actual emotional components that drive a person's decision making,
That's right.
what's the point,
And
right? Like,
understanding what they need in the moment. One of my all-time favorite statistics was one that Forrester published a few years back where they said 95% of business decision makers will choose the brand that meets their needs in the moment. So if you're not
yeah.
meeting their need in the moment, you may ultimately have the best solution, the best story, the best product at the best price. But if somebody else understood that prospect in their moment of need, you'll never get to meet that person.
So let me ask you a question about Gen Z. Do you think B2B marketers should be a little concerned?
I don't think they should be concerned. I think they should be paying attention
Hmm.
because it's still a little too easy for business to business marketers to say, well, Gen Z, the oldest ones, they're still only in their mid 20s. They're not a major force in the business space yet. That's not true. 1 in 5 members of Gen Z is making a 6-figure income. They are moving into dominance in the business world almost faster than people can keep up with. And because they are not just digital natives, they are social natives. They are used to
Hmm.
doing things differently. They also don't relate to the typical one-on-one selling process that a lot of us associate with marketing in the B2B space. They're used to
Right.
doing everything through electronic means, through social media, buying from people they've never met. They have an entirely different comfort level in the way they navigate content and experiences. So it's really easy to write them off and say, well, they're selfie obsessed and Okay.
Mhm.
But a lot of them now are making manager or director level decisions in businesses that are buying from people listening to this podcast right now.
Right,
And
right.
it's important that everyone understands that Gen Z is not only different, but they have an outsized influence on the older
Mhm.
generations to an extent
Okay.
we have not seen in the past because their grasp of technology is so innate. We're seeing Gen Z actually change the way millennials and Gen Xers and boomers are getting things done
Right.
day to day. You know, people of
Yep.
my age, I mean, I'm in my 50s. If you're of my generation, you remember like the first time somebody brought home a piece of new technology, like who taught you how to use a VCR? You know,
Right,
who
right.
probably taught you how to use a computer for the first time? It was always somebody older. It doesn't work
Mhm.
that way anymore.
Mhm.
Now
True.
it's Gen Z teaching everyone how everything works. So
Right.
I don't think it's a watch out. I think it's a pay attention
Mhm.
because the influence they're going to have on the way commerce works in the next few years is going to be eye opening.
That's a great takeaway, I think. So, question, if you were to start, or if the CMOs out there and they're starting in the B2B space, where should they begin? Let's say they're either walking into something that either exists or they're starting with a clean slate. Any recommendations to that CMO?
Well, it's a challenging time to be a CMO. I mean, it has been for quite a while, but somehow I think there's a level of urgency that exists today that again, so much of it is about speed. It kind of takes me back to whenever I've interviewed candidates to work in a strategy role, in a leadership role. Very often I give them a scenario. And the scenario would be I would serve up a business problem for one of our clients or, you know, a potential business problem and say, so if you had to solve this, tell me how you'd start. And there was really only ever one right answer for me, which was it had to begin with understanding what customers want.
Mhm.
I don't care if the brand has a competitive problem. I don't care if the brand has a pricing problem. I don't care if it has a material sourcing problem. The reality is, if you don't begin by understanding why somebody is buying and what they need, you can't possibly solve their problems. You can't possibly be a successful marketer. So if I was stepping into, and I was very close to a CMO role before I decided to start Sooth, everything in my mind was I really need to understand how people buy in this category, what they want, what they're getting from this brand, and what they're getting from competitors that they're not getting
Right.
from the brand. Very often, your greatest competition might not even be one that you've named. It's either one who's going to solve a problem that no one knows they have yet, or sometimes the thing you're battling is inertia.
Right.
You know, I remember years ago working with a major healthcare brand that was starting a chain of urgent care clinics.
Mhm.
And they presented me with all this information and said, well, we think X% of our competition comes from emergency rooms, and Y% of our competition comes from private practice physicians. And when I dug in deep, I said, no, actually, in the urgent care space, your number one competitor is people doing nothing. Your number one competitor is it's just a cold, it's just an ache,
Mhm.
it's just a pain. I don't have to
Right.
see a doctor. And looking at it that way versus figuring out how to get people to come here versus going to the emergency room changed everything strategically. And
Right.
it's what made our efforts so successful. So, as a CMO, I would always begin with who's buying in my category? How's the brand meeting their needs today? And how can their needs be better met?
Right.
And I would invest in learning as much as I could about the customer before doing anything else. I think probably the only other thing I would say in the B2B space specifically is also understand what's happening in the field. Because very often in a brand marketing role for a B2B company, unless it's a smaller organization, there's another layer between you and the ultimate buyer. and
Right.
understanding what is happening between the brand and that end experience where somebody is signing a contract or issuing a PO is critical because there's a lot that gets broken in that chain. So my first 30 days on the job,
Right.
I'm understanding the customers and I'm understanding the last mile of the sales process.
Now, and to your point, understanding their emotional state as well, their behaviors, their characteristics, their attitudes, and everything that goes with that. So, let me get to my last question to you. What do you think the biggest mistake B2B marketers make today?
There are a lot of mistakes, and
Mm.
we could go through a list. I think we just spoke about one of the really important ones, which comes back to understanding. But I think on a tactical level, where more marketers go wrong than anything else, is there is such a hyper focus on that moment of truth, on the moment somebody is ready to sign, on the moment somebody is ready to
Mhm.
say yes. We listen to companies that sell data for a living. They would have you
Right.
believe everything, but only knowing who you are at the moment you're ready to buy is leaving about 90 to 95% of the sales opportunity on the
Right.
table. So I would say the biggest mistake I see brands make is too much of a focus on what somebody determined is the moment of truth, as opposed to understanding who's buying from you and what motivates.
And I loved what you talked about when you talked about that sort of funnel and customer journey because people do. They can make a decision in a nanosecond, and all those that funnel process isn't even in play. So
Well,
it's
I
making
think
sure that
if
you
you're a brand that has invested millions of dollars in building brand equity,
right.
and
Yep.
it all goes up in smoke in 20 seconds of a social media interaction, what have you been spending your money on?
Exactly. No, great point. Thank you, Ian. That's great. So I just want to take a moment and thank Ian. That was great. I'd love to hear your insights on obviously Sooth and taking that emotional angle with marketing. I think that's really important, and often that's an oversight. I also want to thank the audience for listening in to B2B Brand 180 podcast, and I hope you found some of the insights and strategies shared today to be valuable. So, what's the best way to get in touch with you, Ian?
Oh, you can. LinkedIn's always a great way to find me, or visit our website, which is Soothbetold, SOOTHBETOLD.com. And you can shoot me an email at hello@soothbetold.com. Love talking shop.
Yep.
Happy to answer any questions and look forward to hearing from people. Thank you. And Linda, thank you
Great.
so much
Yeah,
for
no,
having me. It's been a pleasure.
absolutely. Thanks for coming on. So again, I'm Linda Fanaris, host of the B2B Brand 180 podcast and CEO of Millennium Agency. You can feel free to visit us at mill.agency or lindafanaris.com. Or again, you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And thanks again for listening to the B2B Brand 180 podcast.